again. Good morning, good morning. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here. For me, as every day, it's always a pleasure for me to be here. Even if I don't feel like teaching, I enjoy coming here, spending half an hour with Marta and enjoying the lights, enjoying this room, enjoying the camera, enjoying your company, disfrutando de tu compañía, enjoying your company. Why not? If you have a positive attitude, smiling, and walking on the sunny side of the street, always, all right? So it's a pleasure. How are you doing today? How are you doing today? ¿Qué tal hoy? ¿Cómo te va la cosa? How are things going today? Fine? All right. Grammar. I'm going to continue where I left off yesterday with the past conditional. I'm going to continue where I left off yesterday with the past conditional. Do you remember Cain and Abel? Cain y Abel. ¿Te acuerdas, no? Cain and Abel. 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 All right. Cain killed Abel. Poor guy. Boy, Abel lost his life. Yeah. Somos hijos de Caín, ¿no? Hijos de la envidia. Bueno, maybe. Adam and Eve had a third child, Seth. Aquí se dice Set, creo que Seth. So, 50% of the people are from children of Seth and 50% children of Cain. So half the people in the world suffer envy. I don't. I have never felt envy in my life. I don't understand the feeling of envy. I don't understand it. I'm still soy ingenuo en esto. Todavía no lo entiendo. I don't understand envy. But in any case, Cain was envious of his brother Abel because God accepted Abel's offerings and didn't accept Cain's. If God had accepted, ahora vamos con el pasado condicional. If God had accepted both offerings, maybe Cain wouldn't have become envious of his brother. But we don't know. All right, we really don't know. But God decided to accept Abel's offerings, and he decided not to accept Cain's offerings. So Cain killed his brother. He wouldn't have killed his brother if he hadn't been envious of him. Yeah. If Cain hadn't been envious of his brother, he wouldn't have killed him. And Abel would have continued alive. And God saw what happened because he was watching. Vi lo que pasó porque estaba observándolo. God saw what happened because he was watching. If he hadn't been watching, he wouldn't have known what happened. But he saw everything. And he asked Cain. He said, "Hey, Cain, where's your brother?" And Cain said, "I'm not my brother's keeper. ¿Acaso soy guardián de mi hermano? I'm not my brother's keeper." God said, "Cain, where's your brother?" And so Cain realized that God saw what happened. Yes. If God hadn't asked him that question, Cain wouldn't have known that God had been watching what happened. And God decided to punish Cain. If Cain hadn't killed his brother, God wouldn't have punished him. Nothing would have happened. God wouldn't have punished, God wouldn't have punished Cain if he hadn't killed his brother. But he did. So God punished him. How did God punish him? He expelled him. He sent him east of Eden. Cain, Abel, Seth, and Adam and Eve lived in Eden, Edén, pero no en jardín, en el sitio al lado. All right. But al este de Edén había otra tierra que se llama Nod, N-O-D. Nod, like to nod your head. To shake your head is to say no. Hey, Richard, yeah. Do you like onions? Do you like steak? Okay, I'm nodding my head. I'm shaking my head. I'm nodding. Con nodding, vale, no hay que decir head. I'm nodding, estoy asintiendo. But shaking, I can añadir head. I'm shaking my head. She's shaking her head. He's shaking his head. All right. And, but to the land of Nod, curiosa tierra, que aparece solo en el Génesis. After that, nothing. And so he goes to the land of Nod and meets some people there. Yeah. I don't know who those people were. Maybe the same God. I don't know. But in any case, if God hadn't punished Cain, he wouldn't have needed to go to the land of Nod. If God hadn't punished Cain, he would have stayed in Eden. But he went to the land of Nod. All right. And several generations passed. Maybe 10 generations passed. And things got worse. And God wasn't happy with his creation. If things had gotten better, God would have been happy with his creation. But that wasn't the case. Things got worse. Things went downhill. Las cosas evolucionaron cuesta abajo, se dicen. Things got worse. And God wasn't happy. Yes. If things hadn't gotten worse, God would have been okay. But he was unhappy. So he decided to destroy everything. Borrón y cuenta nueva. Yeah. To go back to the drawing board. To go back to the drawing board. To go back to square one. To go back and start from scratch. Tres formas de decir casi lo mismo. To go back to the drawing board. O sea, volver al tablón o tabla de delineación o de dibujo. El dibujante industrial. The drawing board. All right. The drafting table. To go back to the drawing board is a figurative way de volver atrás y empezar otra vez. To go back to square one, tengo que volver al cuadrado número uno. I have to go back to square one, otra vez al cuadrado uno. Back to square one. Or to go back and start from scratch, volver atrás y empezar de cero. Go back and start from scratch. And so God decided to do that because he was not happy with his creation. If he had been happy with his creation, he wouldn't have gone back to the drawing board. If he had been happy, he wouldn't have gone back to the drawing board. But he did. So he decided to destroy the world. If he had been happy with his creation, he wouldn't have decided to destroy the world. Yeah. And he decided to flood the world. A big flood, a gran riada inundación y diluvio universal. All right, the rain. For 40 days and 40 nights. But he decided to save mankind. Mankind is la humanidad. Humanity. He decided to save humanity and the animals and plants. He chose one man and his family to survive. He chose Noah. Noé. You know, why did he choose Noah? He chose Noah because Noah was a good man. If Noah hadn't been a good man, God would have chosen someone else. He would have chosen Noah. I mean, God had Noah's family and several other candidate families. But Noah's family was the best. Noah had 3 children, 3 sons, and each son had a wife. So in all, there were 8 people. The mother, the father, and the 3 sons and their respective wives. And God decided to spare Noah. To spare is perdonarle la vida, es permitir que sobreviviera. To spare, es que Dios pare. If Noah hadn't been a good man, God wouldn't have spared his life. And God gave him instructions on how to build an ark. If God hadn't given him, if God hadn't given Noah specific instructions, Noah wouldn't have known how to build the ark. Noah wasn't a carpenter, necessarily. Noah wasn't a shipbuilder. No tenía una empresa de astilleros. So he didn't know. But God gave him specific instructions on how to build the ark. If God hadn't given him these instructions, Noah wouldn't have known, no habría sabido cómo. He wouldn't have known how to build the ark. But he built it. And God gave him instructions to find a male and female of every animal in the world to put into the ark. All right. And so Noah had to find, and his son had to find, a lot of animals. Yes. And then it started raining. Well, while Noah was building the ark, all the people were laughing at him. They thought he was crazy. The people thought he was crazy because he was building an ark. Yeah. If he hadn't been building an ark, people wouldn't have considered him to be crazy. If he hadn't started building an ark, people wouldn't have started laughing at him, but they did. Because the people didn't believe it was going to rain. To start raining for 40 days and 40 nights. But he finished the ark, and he put all the animals into the ark. Había una rampa. There was a ramp, put the animals up. And it started raining. Yeah. And it didn't stop. And then the people became frightened, and they wanted to get into the ark, and they couldn't. Yes. If the people hadn't been frightened, they wouldn't have tried to get into the ark. But then it started raining, and everything. Water covered the earth. And there was only water. Nothing. And it stopped raining after 40 days and 40 nights. Now, if it had rained only 20 days and 20 nights, I'm sure Noah and his family would have been able to see the tops of the mountains. If it had only rained for 20 days and 20 nights, they would have been able to see certain mountains. But it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, so they weren't able to see. But then it stopped raining. It stopped raining. And the water began to go down. If it had continued raining, the water would have continued rising. But the water began to recede. All right. And Noah sent a dove to look for land. If he hadn't had a dove, he wouldn't have been able to send a bird to find land. But a homing pigeon, paloma mensajera, que vuelve, a homing pigeon. All right. And the pigeon came back with nothing. With nothing. If there had been land, the pigeon or the dove is paloma de campo. Pero cuando decimos paloma mensajera, decimos homing de hogar, buscando su hogar. Homing pigeon, como paloma de ciudad, pigeon. A homing pigeon. We don't say a homing dove. If there had been land, the homing pigeon would have come back with something. A branch of a tree. The second time he sent the homing pigeon out, it came back with an olive branch. Creo que era una rama de olivo. Creo. An olive. I think it came back with an olive branch. Okay. If the water had not receded, the homing pigeon would not have come back with anything. But it came back. And so life started anew. Okay, and we started. So we are descendants of Noah and his family. And then later, as the generations progressed, there was a man by the name of Abram, later Abraham, who lived in a city called Ur, in Samaria, along the Euphrates River, Euphrates. And he decided to take his people to a new land, to the land of milk and honey, to the promised land. And he took his people to the promised land because God told him to take them. If God hadn't spoken to Abraham, he wouldn't have taken his people to Israel. And there, he started a new life with his people, with his tribe, su tribu, with his tribe. All right. And he had a wife. Her name was Sarah. And she couldn't have children. She was barren. Barren means sterile. She couldn't have any children. And she gave Abraham permission to be with the servant girl, Hagar. They had a servant, sirvienta, by the name of Hagar. And Sarah gave her husband permission to be with Hagar, to have a child, because Sarah was barren. Escrito barren. It means she couldn't have children. If she hadn't been barren, she wouldn't have given her husband permission to be with the servant. If she hadn't been barren, she would have a child of her own. They would have had children, but she couldn't have children. So she gave Abraham permission to be with Hagar. And Hagar had a child with Abraham. And the child's name was Ishmael. Now, if Sarah hadn't given Abraham permission to be with Hagar, Ishmael wouldn't have been born. But they were together and Ishmael was born. But then God gave Sarah fertility. And Sarah had a child. At the age of 100, a los 100 años tuvo Isaac. She had Isaac. And when she had Isaac, she decided she didn't want Hagar and Ishmael to continue in the camp, in the tribe. So they expelled Hagar and Ishmael. Ishmael is considered the father of the Arab race. Isaac is considered the father of the Jewish race. Two different races, very similar. They're cousins. They're cousins. So, well, they're half-brothers, really. Son medio hermanos, son hermanastros. The Arabs, por la tradición judaica of the Bible, the Arab race and the Jewish race are half-brothers. Hermanastros de sangre. All right. Both with the same father, Abraham. Por eso se dicen las religiones abrahámicas o algo así, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They all come from Abraham. All right. And so, if Sarah hadn't had a child, she wouldn't have insisted that Hagar and Ishmael leave the tribe. But then God told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. And so Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice. If God hadn't told him to do this, he wouldn't have done it. But finally God stopped Abraham and allowed him to sacrifice a ram. Ram. Sí, como leche ram. Ram? How do you say ram in Spanish? Ram is carnero. Yeah. La oveja macho. The carnero. The ram and the sheep and the lamb. Cordero. All right. The ram. It's a lot. We could go on and on forever talking about the past conditional. We can talk about Moses, Moses. We could talk about many other things. We can talk about Joseph, Isaac. Well, Jacob. Isaac had one son, Jacob, and Esau. He had two sons, etc. But we could go on and on with the Bible, practicing the past conditional. The past conditional. Yes. Fuera de la Biblia, vamos a condicionar el pasado en la actualidad. Si me hubiera despertado esta mañana con 40 fiebre, no habría venido. If I had woken up this morning with a 40-degree fever, I wouldn't have come here. I would have called Marta and told her that I couldn't come. And Marta would have used the time to do other things. All right, if I had had. Now, if I had had a 40-degree fever last night, I wouldn't have called Marta. I would have waited. I would have sent her a message. If I had had a 40-degree fever last night, I would have sent her a message. Estoy pachucho. I'm under the weather. I will confirm yes or no tomorrow morning, first thing. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Mañana por la mañana, a primerísima hora. First thing in the morning, first thing. I would have sent her a message last night if I had had a fever. Now, if I had woken up this morning with a fever, I would have called her. I would have called her, and I wouldn't have come. Yes. If I had had a serious relationship with a girl when I was 22, I probably wouldn't have come to Spain. I came to Spain the second time and permanently when I was 22. And at that time, I didn't have a serious relationship with a girl in Texas, at the University of Texas. Now, if I had met, si hubiera conocido el amor de mi vida, if I had met the love of my life, when I was in the campus of the University of Texas in Austin, Texas, in my final year, when I was 22, if I had met the love of my life, I probably wouldn't have come to Spain. Or maybe I would have suggested that she come with me. Hubiera sugerido que viniera. I would have suggested that she come. No, she comes. Eso es el subjuntivo latino en inglés. Hubiera sugerido que viniera. I would have suggested that she come. She come. Fuera de contexto parece incorrecto. Ella viene, she comes. Third person singular, pero eso es indicativo, no es subjuntivo. I would have suggested that she be, que ella fuera, o estuviera. I would suggest that she come with me to Spain. And if she had said no, I would have had a dilemma. Now, at age 22, I wanted to come back to Spain. Now, if I had been in love, if I had been, hopelessly in love, all right, we say, perdidamente enamorado, we say, desesperadamente, sin esperanza, hopelessly in love. If I had been hopelessly in love, I probably would have stayed in Texas. ¿Habría sido error o no, en tu opinión? Would it have been, pasado condicional, would it have been a mistake in your opinion? Not to come to Spain because of love? When you're 22, is that too young to change your life plans because of love? Love is a many splendored thing. Love is a very powerful feeling. It changes certain chemicals in your brain. No es amor necesariamente. It could be obsession, of course. It could be infatuation, encaprichamiento. Yeah. We say infatuación, escrito. Me gusta la palabra infatuation. means encaprichamiento. You can become infatuated. You need to be careful on your relationships and be able to separate love from simple infatuation. So I think I would have come to Spain anyway. But I didn't have a steady or a serious relationship at that time. And my father wasn't ill at that time. When I was 22, if my father had been, si hubiera sido o estado, if my father had been seriously ill, si hubiera estado seriamente enfermo, if my father had been seriously ill, I probably wouldn't have come to Spain. I would have stayed there to look after to help my mother, probably. Because my sister at that time was living in Denver, Colorado, 3 days away by car. It's a long way. But that's the story. Past condition, una media hora con el condicional. Wow. See you tomorrow.